The coffee I poured trembled in the cup, a thin brown line disrupting the foam heart I'd drawn. My hands never used to shake at Giovanna's, not in 3 years of slinging espresso and tiramisu to Brooklyn's Italian neighborhood. But they shook now. Because of the boy. He sat in booth 7 every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 3:47 p.m. Always alone, always silent. 8 years old, maybe 9. Dark curls that fell across his forehead. Eyes like polished obsidian that tracked everything. The door, the windows, the kitchen entrance, but never met mine. He never ordered, never spoke, just sat. And every time, exactly 12 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside. The boy would stand, smooth his shirt with small, precise hands, and leave. No goodbye, no backward glance. Table 7 needs water, Rosa called from the register, her accent thick as the marinara simmering in the back. He doesn't drink it, I said, but I grabbed the pitcher anyway. The November rain hammered the windows, turning Atlantic Avenue into a blur of brake lights and umbrellas. Inside Giovanna's, the air smelled of garlic and espresso and the lilies Rosa replaced every Monday. Comfort food. Comfort smells. Everything designed to make you feel safe. I didn't feel safe anymore. I approached booth 7 slowly, the way you approach a stray dog uncertain whether it will flee or bite. The boy sat utterly still, his small hands folded on the red vinyl table. He wore clothes too expensive for this neighborhood. A wool coat with bone buttons, leather shoes that gleamed despite the weather. "Hi," I said softly, setting the water glass down. "I'm Ivy." Nothing, not even a flicker. "You come here a lot," I just thought. "Maybe you'd like something to eat?" "We have fresh sfogliatelle today. They're really good." His eyes shifted just barely to the window. Watching. Always watching. I crouched beside the booth, making myself smaller, less threatening. My grandmother used to say I had a face people trusted. Round cheeks, wide hazel eyes, the kind of softness that made strangers tell me their problems while I refilled their coffee. But this boy looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You don't have to talk," I whispered. "I just want you to know someone sees you, okay?" For the first time in 6 weeks, his eyes met mine. And in that moment, I saw it. Not childish fear, but something older. Something exhausted. Like he'd been carrying a weight so heavy it had compressed his childhood into something dense and dark and silent. The bell above the door chimed. The boy's face went blank, a shutter dropping. He stood so quickly the table rocked, water sloshing over the rim of the untouched glass. I straightened, turning toward the door, and my breath caught. The man who entered didn't walk, he prowled. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a hard line. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Gray, pale as winter fog. And absolutely merciless. He moved through Giovanna's, like he owned it, like he owned everything. Rosa froze at the register. Old Mr. Castellano, who'd been arguing with his brother over dominoes for the past hour, went silent. Even the rain seemed to quiet against the windows. The man's gaze swept the restaurant, dismissive, until it landed on me. His expression didn't change, didn't soften. But something flickered in those gray eyes. Assessment, calculation, the quick mathematics of threat and weakness. I forced myself to breathe, to not step back. "Alessandro," the man said. His voice was low, controlled, with an accent that turned the vowels into something sharp. Not a question, a command. The boy moved immediately, fluid as water, sliding out of the booth and crossing to the man's side. He didn't take the man's hand, didn't look up at him, just stood there, small and silent, like a shadow learning to exist beside something burning. "He comes here often," I heard myself say. The man's eyes snapped back to me. "Excuse me?" My pulse hammered in my throat, but I didn't look away. "Your son. He comes here twice a week. He sits in that booth and doesn't order anything, and then he leaves." Something dangerous moved across the man's face. And I thought you should know. That's all." The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop. Rosa made a small sound behind the register, a warning, a prayer, I couldn't tell which. The man took a step toward me, and even though he didn't touch me, didn't threaten me with anything except his presence, I felt the violence coiled inside him like a snake deciding whether to strike. "You thought," he said softly, "that you should tell me what my son does? I thought you might not know he was alone. He's never alone. He looks alone." The words hung between us, sharp as broken glass. The boy Alessandro stared at the floor, his small body rigid with tension. The man's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, I thought he might lash out, might unleash whatever fury I could sense, burning beneath that controlled surface. But then his eyes dropped to Alessandro, and something in his face shifted. Not softening, exactly. More like recognition. The way you might look at your reflection and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. Alessandro doesn't speak, the man said, his voice carefully neutral. He hasn't spoken in 2 years. My heart cracked. I'm sorry. We don't need your pity. It's not pity. I crouched again, meeting Alessandro's eyes. It's just, I see him, and I think maybe nobody else does. The boy's fingers twitched. Just once, like he wanted to reach out but had forgotten how. The man stared at me for a long, terrible moment. Then he placed one hand on Alessandro's shoulder carefully, like touching something breakable, and guided him toward the door. They were almost outside when the man stopped. Turned back. What's your name? Ivy. Ivy Brennan. His gray eyes held mine, reading something I didn't understand. Stay away from my son, Miss Brennan, for your own good. And then they were gone, swallowed by the rain and the black SUV that materialized at the curb like it had been waiting all along. Rosa crossed herself. Santa Madonna. Ivy. Do you know who that was? No, I said, but my hands were shaking again. Worse than before. Dante Salvatore. Rosa's voice dropped to a whisper. The Salvatore family. You don't talk to them. You don't look at them. You certainly don't tell them how to raise their children. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Rosa said it, like invoking something dark and holy, made my skin prickle. I looked at booth 7. At the water glass still sitting there, full and untouched. At the small, damp footprints leading to the door, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing in my safe, quiet life would ever be the same. I dreamed of gray eyes that night. They followed me through dark hallways lined with portraits of stern men in expensive suits, followed me through rooms filled with marble and gold, and the copper smell of something I didn't want to name. In the dream, Alessandro stood at the end of a long corridor, his small hand outstretched, his mouth open in a silent scream. I woke at 4 a.m., heart racing, sheets tangled around my legs. My apartment was quiet except for the radiator's rhythmic hiss and the muted sounds of Brooklyn waking up outside my window. I lived above a dry cleaner on a street where grandmothers still swept their stoops, and men played cards on folding tables in the summer. Safe. Normal. Everything I'd worked for since leaving my mother's chaos in Queens 5 years ago. But safety felt different now. Thinner. I made coffee I didn't drink and watched the sunrise turn my kitchen walls from gray to gold. Rosa's words kept circling. The Salvatore family. You don't talk to them. My phone sat on the counter, and before I could stop myself, I opened the browser and typed, Dante Salvatore Brooklyn. The search results made my coffee go cold. Salvatore family alleged in federal racketeering case. NYPD investigates connection between waterfront fire and organized crime. Dante Salvatore, 34. Named in witness intimidation probe. The articles were careful, full of words like alleged and suspected, and no charges filed. But the photos told a different story. Dante at a courthouse, his face carved from stone. Dante at a charity gala, beautiful women draped on his arm like jewelry. Dante leaving a restaurant while photographers scattered like startled birds. And in one photo, barely visible in the background, a small boy with dark curls, his face turned away from the camera. Alessandro. I closed the browser, but the images stayed burned in my mind. I didn't go to work that day. Called in sick with a voice that sounded steadier than I felt. Rosa didn't question it, just told me to rest, to drink tea, to stay away from drafts. She didn't mention Dante Salvatore, didn't need to. But Thursday came, and with it, 3:47 p.m. I told myself I wouldn't look, wouldn't watch for the black SUV or the boy who didn't speak. I had a full section, orders backing up, Rosa muttering about the espresso machine making sounds it shouldn't. I lasted until 3:52 p.m., then I looked at booth 7, empty. Relief and disappointment twisted together in my chest. Maybe Rosa had been right. Maybe Dante Salvatore had taken my warning as the insult it probably was, and decided his son would never step foot in Giovanna's again. The bell chimed. Alessandro stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his wool coat, alone. My heart lurched. I scanned the street outside. No SUV, no hulking bodyguards, no sign of the dangerous man who'd looked at me like I was an insect he might crush. The boy's eyes found mine across the restaurant. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, slowly, he walked to booth 7 and sat down. I glanced at Rosa, who was watching with the intensity of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. She shook her head sharply. Don't. I grabbed a menu and crossed to the booth anyway. Hi, Alessandro, I said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. Remember me? Ivy? He watched me with those 2 old eyes. Are you here alone? A tiny nod. Barely perceptible. My pulse quickened. Does your father know you're here? Alessandro's jaw tightened. He looked away, toward the window, and I saw it again, that exhaustion, that weight. Okay, I said softly. You don't have to tell me, but I'm going to get you something to eat. All right? And you're going to sit here where it's warm and dry, and we're not going to worry about anything else. I stood, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist. I froze. His fingers were small, cold, trembling slightly. He wasn't hurting me, just holding on, like I was the only solid thing in a world that had stopped making sense. It's okay, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere. He released me slowly, his hand falling back to the table. I brought him hot chocolate and a plate of fresh cannoli. He didn't touch either, but he didn't leave, just sat there, watching the rain and the street and the door, waiting for something I couldn't name. At 4:15 p.m., the door opened. Dante Salvatore stepped inside, and the entire restaurant held its breath. He was dressed differently, no suit, just dark jeans and a leather jacket that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. Rain darkened his hair, plastered it against his forehead, but his eyes were the same. Cold, controlled, lethal. They locked on Alessandro. Then shifted to me. I stood up slowly, hands raised slightly, like calming a predator. He's fine. He's safe. Dante crossed the restaurant in 4 strides. Alessandro, car, now. The boy didn't move. Now, Dante repeated, his voice dropping to something barely audible. Alessandro slid out of the booth, but his movements were slower than before, reluctant. His eyes darted to me, then away. Dante grabbed his son's shoulder not roughly, but firmly, and steered him toward the door. But before they reached it, he stopped, turned. You gave him food, Dante said flatly. He looked hungry. He has chefs. He has everything. He has silence, I said before I could stop myself. That's not everything. Dante's face went dangerously still. He took a step toward me, and this time Rosa did make a sound, a sharp intake of breath that might have been a warning or a prayer. You don't know anything about my son, Dante said quietly. You don't know what he needs, what he's been through, what I've done to keep him safe. You're right, I said, my voice steadier than my hands. I don't know, but I know he keeps coming back here, and I know you can't scare away whatever he's looking for. Something flickered across Dante's face. Shock, maybe, or rage. I couldn't tell. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and I realized with sudden clarity that this man could hurt me, that he'd probably hurt people for less than what I'd just said, but he didn't. Instead, he leaned in close enough that I could smell rain and expensive cologne, and something darker underneath smoke, maybe, or gunpowder. Stay away from us, he said, each word carved from ice. This is your last warning. Then he was gone, pulling Alessandro through the door and into the waiting SUV. I stood there, shaking, Rosa's voice a distant buzz of Italian prayers and scolding. Through the rain-streaked window, I watched the SUV disappear, and I saw Alessandro's small face pressed against the glass, looking back. The lily appeared on my doorstep Friday morning, a single white calla lily, wrapped in black paper, no card. It sat propped against my apartment door like an accusation, or a promise. I picked it up with hands that remembered how to shake, turned it over, searching for some message. Nothing, just the flower, pure white against the darkness. I brought it inside because leaving it felt like an invitation to worse things. Set it in a glass of water on my kitchen windowsill where the morning light turned it luminous, beautiful, and somehow threatening all at once. My phone buzzed. Rosa, don't come in today, please. I stared at the message, at the lily, at my reflection in the darkened phone screen. When had I become the kind of person who received warnings? Why? I typed back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, men came asking about you, just stay home. My apartment suddenly felt very small, very exposed. I checked the locks door, windows, the fire escape I never used. All secure. But security was an illusion, wasn't it? If Dante Salvatore wanted to find me, locks wouldn't stop him. The question was, why would he want to? I'd been rude, sure, overstepped. But I'd also just been kind to a child who looked like he needed it. That shouldn't earn this kind of attention. This weight, unless kindness itself was the threat. I spent the day researching, falling down digital rabbit holes I should have avoided. The Salvatore family tree stretched back generations, each branch stained with allegations of extortion, smuggling, violence. Dante's father, Leonardo, had died 5 years ago in what newspapers called a tragic car accident. The kind of tragic that resulted in 3 other vehicles burning and no witnesses willing to talk. Dante had taken over at 29. The articles described him as more ruthless than his father, and modernizing operations in ways that made the NYPD very nervous and federal prosecutors very busy. But nothing stuck. Witnesses recanted. Evidence disappeared. People who talked too much stopped talking at all. And 2 years ago, right around when Alessandro stopped speaking, Dante's wife had died. The articles were vague. Sofia Salvatore, 31, found deceased in the family estate. No foul play suspected, but the photos told a different story. Sofia had been beautiful, dark hair, warm eyes, the kind of smile that looked genuine even in society page photographs. And in every photo that included Alessandro, her hand was on his shoulder, his head leaning against her side. I closed my laptop, but the images followed me. A boy who'd lost his mother. A man who'd lost his wife. Silence filling the space where words used to be. The knock on my door came at sunset. I wasn't expecting anyone. My neighbors kept to themselves, and the delivery drivers always buzzed from downstairs. But someone was knocking firm, measured, impossible to ignore. I checked the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. Mid-20s, sharp black suit, dark hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She smiled at the peephole, and somehow I knew she could see me even through the distorted glass. "Miss Brennan," she called through the door. "I work for Mr. Salvatore. He'd like to speak with you." My heart kicked against my ribs. "Tell him no. He anticipated you'd say that." She held up a phone, screen facing the door. "He asked me to show you this." I couldn't make out the details through the peephole, but I didn't need to. I knew what it was. Who it was. I opened the door. The woman's smile sharpened. Up close, she was striking all angles in cold professionalism. The phone screen showed a photo of Alessandro and Giovanna's, sitting in booth 7, my hand on his wrist. "He wants to meet," she said. "Tonight, 7 p.m. He'll send a car, and if I say no, then we keep watching, keep documenting, keep protecting what's ours." Her eyes flicked to the lily in my window. "Mr. Salvatore values 2 things, Miss Brennan, family and control. You've inserted yourself into one. He needs to ensure you're not a threat to the other. I'm not. Tell him that yourself. 7 p.m. She slipped a business card into my hand. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, a phone number and nothing else. "The car will be outside." She left before I could argue, heels clicking down the hallway like countdown beats. I looked at the card, at the lily, at my reflection in the window, round face, wide eyes, soft edges. I looked like someone who served coffee and smiled at strangers, not someone who got caught in the orbit of dangerous men. But maybe that's how it always started, with kindness, with seeing something nobody else wanted to see. I had 3 hours. The car was black, sleek, and utterly silent. The driver didn't speak, didn't look back as he navigated through Brooklyn streets. I half recognized. We crossed into neighborhoods where brownstones gave way to industrial buildings, then to something else entirely. Iron gates, long driveways, estates that looked like they'd been transplanted from Europe. We stopped in front of a mansion that belonged in a different century. Stone and wrought iron and windows that gleamed like watching eyes. Gardens manicured within an inch of their lives despite November's cold, and everywhere, subtly placed. Cameras, guards, the weight of money and power pressing down like gravity. The driver opened my door. "He's waiting in the study." I followed a different suited woman through hallways lined with portraits the Salvatore lineage, I assumed. Men with hard faces and expensive clothes, women with jewels at their throats, and something sad in their eyes. We stopped at a door carved from dark wood, and she knocked once before opening it. "Miss Brennan," she announced, then disappeared. The study smelled of leather and wood smoke and old paper. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls. A fireplace crackled on the 4th, and in the center, behind a desk that looked older than America, sat Dante Salvatore. He stood as I entered. A show of manners that felt wrong on him, like watching a wolf pretend to be domesticated. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I remained standing. "Where's Alessandro?" Something flickered in his gray eyes. "Surprise, maybe. Upstairs, sleeping. Why?" "Because if you're going to threaten me, I want to know he's not listening." Dante's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "I'm not going to threaten you, Miss Brennan." "Then what is this?" He moved around the desk with that same predatory grace, and I forced myself not to step back. He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his pupils dilated when he looked at me. "This," he said quietly, "is me trying to understand why a waitress from a neighborhood cafe thinks she knows more about my son than I do. I don't think that." "Then what do you think?" I met his eyes, held them. "I think he's drowning, and you're too angry to see it." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dante's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd gone too far, that this would be where the polite conversation ended, and something darker began. But then he turned away, moved to the window overlooking the dark gardens. "You don't know anything," he said, his voice rough. "No," I agreed, "but I know what grief looks like." His shoulders tensed. "My wife died 2 years ago." Alessandro watched her. He stopped, the words cutting off like he'd bitten through his own tongue. He hasn't spoken since. Specialists, therapists, doctors, none of them can reach him. He lives in silence because the world is too loud, or because you are. Dante spun, and this time the violence showed. His hand slammed against the window frame hard enough to make the glass shiver. "Watch yourself. You asked what I think. I think Alessandro comes to Giovanna's because it's the only place nobody expects anything from him, including speech, including being the son of Dante Salvatore. So you're his what? Savior?" The mockery in his voice cut like glass. "No, just someone who sees him." Dante stared at me for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a harsh, bitter sound. "Do you know what happens to people who see too much in my world, Miss Brennan? I'm guessing nothing good. They disappear. They get hurt. They become liabilities." He crossed back to me, and this time when he invaded my space, there was something desperate underneath the danger. "So I need to know. What do you want? Money? Protection? A favor you can cash in later?" "I want Alessandro to be okay." The simplicity of it seemed to stagger him. He searched my face like I was a code he couldn't crack, and I realized something that should have terrified me. Dante Salvatore had no idea how to respond to honesty. "He keeps your lily," Dante said finally, quietly. "The one from Giovanna's. The cheap decoration from your table. He keeps it in his room like it's something precious." My throat tightened. "The flower. It's dying now, but he won't let anyone throw it away." Dante's voice dropped to something raw. "Tell me how to reach him. Tell me what you see that I can't." And in that moment, standing in his study with the fire crackling and the shadows deep around us, I understood. This wasn't about threats or power or control. This was a father, drowning in grief, begging a stranger to save his son. "Let me talk to him," I said. "Please." Dante's eyes held mine. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Tomorrow. But on my terms, in my home, where I can protect him." He paused. "And if you betray that trust, if you're anyone other than who you seem, I will make sure you regret ever stepping into that cafe." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And strangely, I believed the warning less than I believed the desperation underneath it. The Salvatore estate looked different in daylight, less haunted, more haunting, the kind of beautiful that made you aware of your own smallness. I arrived at 10 a.m. in clothes I'd agonized over for an hour. Jeans, a soft sweater, nothing too formal or too casual, trying to walk the line between threat and help. The same woman from yesterday, I learned her name was Elena, met me at the door. "He's in the conservatory. I'll take you." We walked through rooms that smelled of beeswax and old money, paintings that belonged in museums, furniture that had probably hosted centuries of Salvatore decisions, betrayals, deaths. I tried not to think about what had happened in these hallways, what deals had been struck, what blood had been spilled. The conservatory was unexpected. Glass walls, winter light, plants everywhere, climbing, hanging, potted. Green life in defiance of November's cold. And in the center, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a sketchbook, was Alessandro. He looked up when I entered, no surprise in his eyes. like he'd been expecting me. "Hi," I said softly. "Can I sit with you?" He considered this for a moment, then nodded, a tiny dip of his chin. I sat on the floor across from him, leaving space between us. His sketchbook was open, and I could see pencil drawings, buildings, faces, hands. They were good, detailed, the work of someone who watched the world carefully because speaking about it wasn't an option. "You draw?" I asked, knowing he wouldn't answer, but offering the question anyway. Alessandro turned the page, revealing a new drawing, and my breath caught. It was me. I sat in booth 7. My face turned toward the window, one hand holding a coffee pot. He'd captured the exact slope of my shoulders, the way my hair fell across my cheek. But it was my expression that stopped me. He'd drawn me looking sad, not crying, not obviously upset, just carrying something heavy. "You see a lot," I whispered. He closed the sketchbook carefully, his small hands protective of the pages. "Your dad said you keep the lily from the restaurant." Alessandro's eyes flicked to the corner of the conservatory, where a mason jar sat on a shelf. Inside, one wilted calla lily, its white petals gone brown at the edges. "It meant something to you," I said. Not a question. He picked up his pencil, opened to a fresh page, and began drawing. I watched his hand move across the paper, quick, confident strokes. A woman emerged. Dark hair, warm eyes, a smile that looked like sunlight. His mother. "Sophia," I said gently. Alessandro's pencil stilled. He didn't look up, but his shoulders tensed like he was preparing for pain. "She liked flowers, didn't she? That's why you kept the lily." His hand trembled. "Just once. I'm sorry she's gone, Alessandro. I'm sorry you had to see." I stopped, because I didn't actually know what he'd seen, just that it had been enough to steal his voice. "I'm sorry you're carrying this alone." He set down the pencil, looked at me directly, and I saw it again. That exhaustion, that weight. But underneath it, something else. Something desperate. He wanted to speak. I could see it in the way his mouth opened slightly, in how his breath quickened. He wanted to tell me something, explain something, maybe just say one word that would crack open the silence and let the pain bleed out. But nothing came. His face crumpled, not into tears, but into something worse. Frustration, fury, the kind of anger that turns inward because there's nowhere else for it to go. "Hey," I said quickly, moving closer. "It's okay. You don't have to speak. Not to me. Not to anyone. The silence doesn't make you less." The door opened. Dante stood in the doorway, still as stone. His eyes moved from Alessandro to me, reading the moment with the same careful attention his son gave to drawings. "Time's up," he said flatly. "We just started. Alessandro has lessons. Elena will show you out." I looked at the boy, whose face had gone blank again, back to that careful neutrality. But his fingers were white-knuckled around the pencil. "5 more minutes," I said to Dante. His jaw tightened. "Miss Brennan, 5 minutes, please." We locked eyes across the conservatory. I should have been afraid this man could destroy me with a phone call, make me disappear, ensure I never worked in Brooklyn again. But I wasn't asking for myself. Something shifted in his expression. 5 minutes. Elena stays. He left, and the security woman materialized in the doorway like she'd been waiting in the walls. I turned back to Alessandro, who was watching me with something close to wonder. "Your dad loves you," I said quietly. "He's just scared. And sometimes fear makes people hard." Alessandro picked up his pencil again, drew quickly. A man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, standing in a doorway. But where the face should have been, Alessandro had drawn something else, a wall. "He doesn't let you in," I said, understanding. "Or maybe you don't know how to reach him through his own walls." Alessandro nodded. "What if we taught you another way to talk? Not with words, with something else." He tilted his head, curious. "Your drawings, they speak. What if we gave your dad a drawing that said what you can't?" For the first time, something like hope flickered across Alessandro's face. He flipped to a fresh page, hesitated, then began drawing again. I watched the image take shape. 2 hands reaching toward each other, fingers almost touching. Almost, but not quite. It was heartbreaking. And perfect. "Can I give this to him?" I asked. "Is that okay?" Alessandro tore the page carefully from his sketchbook and placed it in my hands. His fingers brushed mine just briefly, and I felt the trust in that small touch. the hope that maybe someone could bridge the distance his voice couldn't cross. Elena cleared her throat. Time. I stood, tucking the drawing carefully into my bag. I'll come back if you want me to. If your dad lets me. Alessandro nodded quickly. Definitely. I found Dante in his study, standing at the window with a glass of something amber and strong. He didn't turn when I entered. He drew this, I said, setting Alessandro's drawing on the desk. For you. Dante turned slowly, his eyes dropping to the paper. For a moment, his carefully controlled expression, fractured, just a crack, just enough for me to see the pain underneath. The hands reaching, almost touching. He's trying, I said softly. But he doesn't know if you'll reach back. Dante's hand hovered over the drawing like it might burn him. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You're just afraid of what happens if you fail. His eyes snapped to mine, sharp with something between anger and anguish. Do you have children, Miss Brennan? No. Then don't tell me about fear. Don't tell me about failure. You have no idea what it's like to watch your child break and not be able to fix it. To know that every word you say might be the wrong one. To wonder if the last thing your wife did was look at you and think you weren't enough. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and bleeding. You're right, I said. I don't know. But Alessandro does. And he's still trying to reach you. Are you going to let him? Dante picked up the drawing with hands that shook just slightly, just enough. He stared at it like it was scripture, like it held answers to questions he'd stopped asking. Come back Tuesday, he said, his voice rough. 3 o'clock, no cafe. Here. It wasn't quite permission, but it was close. Okay, I said. Tuesday. I left him standing there, holding his son's drawing like a prayer. And for the first time since this had started, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the one in over my head. Maybe we all were. I didn't expect to hear from Dante Salvatore before Tuesday. But Monday night, my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Miss Brennan. His voice was controlled, but underneath I heard something else. Urgency. I need you to come to the estate. Now. I sat up in bed, heart already racing. What happened? Alessandro won't sleep. Won't calm down. I've tried. He stopped, and in that silence I heard a father's helplessness. Please. I'm coming. The car arrived 15 minutes later. The driver moved through empty Brooklyn streets with practiced ease. And I tried not to think about what kind of emergency required me a stranger, really in the middle of the night. Tried not to think about what won't calm down meant for a child who didn't speak. The estate looked different in darkness. More gothic, more menacing. Windows blazed with light, but it only made the shadows deeper. Elena met me at the door, her usual composure fractured. Second floor, she said. Mr. Salvatore is with him. I took the stairs 2 at a time, following the sound of, not crying, worse, a keening, desperate sound. Wordless grief, pouring out in broken gasps and choked breaths. I found Alessandro's room at the end of a hallway lined with family portraits. The door was open. Alessandro sat in the center of his bed, rocking. His small body shook with sobs that had no voice, tears streaming down his face, hands clenched in his hair like he wanted to pull something out, something that wouldn't leave. Dante knelt beside the bed, hands hovering uselessly. Alessandro, Figlio, please, tell me what you need. But Alessandro couldn't, and the not speaking made the grief more terrible. Somehow, trapped, choking. I moved into the room slowly. Dante. He turned, and I saw raw panic in his eyes. He woke up screaming. He stopped, not screaming, but the sound I thought something was breaking him. I thought, give me space, I said quietly. I'm not leaving, then move back. Let me try. Dante stood, backing toward the wall, every line of his body screaming reluctance. I sat on the edge of Alessandro's bed, not touching him, just being present. Alessandro, I said softly, it's Ivy, from Giovanna's. Remember? The keening hitched, not stopping, but pausing. I know it hurts. I know the words won't come and that makes it worse. But I'm here. And you don't have to explain. You don't have to make it make sense. You just have to breathe. I started breathing exaggeratedly, slow inhales, long exhales. After a moment, Alessandro's gasping began to match my rhythm. Still crying, but breathing. Finding a pattern in the chaos. That's good, I murmured. Just like that. In and out. You're safe. Gradually, the keening quieted to soft sobs. Alessandro's hands loosened in his hair. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I saw the same question he'd asked with his drawing. "Can you reach me? Want to show me what happened?" I asked gently. "In your sketchbook?" Alessandro hesitated, then reached for the notebook on his nightstand. His hands shook as he opened it, flipping past drawings until he found what he needed. The image made my throat close. A woman lying on marble, dark hair spread around her head like a halo, her eyes open, staring at nothing, and standing in the doorway, a small boy, frozen. "You found her," I whispered. Alessandro nodded, tears spilling again. I looked at Dante, who'd gone absolutely still against the wall. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "The nightmares," he said hoarsely. "They come every few months. Always the same. Always." He couldn't finish. I turned back to Alessandro. "It's called a trauma memory. Your brain keeps replaying it because it's trying to make sense of something that can't make sense. But here's what I need you to know. It wasn't your fault. Nothing you did or didn't do could have changed what happened." Alessandro shook his head violently. "You think it was your fault?" I asked. He pointed at the drawing. At the boy in the doorway. Then he drew an arrow to the woman and made a gesture pushing, shoving. My heart cracked. "You think if you'd gone to her sooner, you could have saved her?" He nodded, a fresh wave of tears coming. "Oh, sweetheart, no." I looked at Dante. "What happened to Sophia? What does he think he saw?" Dante moved closer, his voice rough. "Aneurysm. The doctors said it was instant. She was gone before she hit the floor, but Alessandro found her and thought..." He stopped, closing his eyes. He thought, if he'd been faster, called for help sooner, she might have woken up. "And you never told him different?" "I told him every day for 6 months, but he stopped believing me. Stopped believing anyone." The guilt. Dante's voice broke. "I didn't know it was this. I thought he was just grieving, not blaming himself." I turned back to Alessandro, taking his small hands in mine. "Listen to me. Your mother's brain had a blood vessel that broke. That happens inside, where nobody can see. Even if you'd been standing right next to her, even if you'd called every doctor in the world, they couldn't have fixed it fast enough. It wasn't about being faster or braver or better. It just happened." Alessandro stared at me, desperate to believe. "And she wouldn't want you carrying this?" I continued. "Mothers never want their children to carry blame for things that aren't their fault. She'd want you to remember her love, not your guilt." Something in Alessandro's face shifted. The desperate tension easing, just slightly. Like maybe, just maybe, he could let himself believe. "Can you try something for me?" I asked. "Can you try to remember one good thing about her? Not the end, just something that made you happy." Alessandro closed his eyes, breathed. Then, slowly, he began drawing again. This time, a woman at a piano, a small boy sitting beside her, both of them smiling. "She played?" I asked. He nodded. "What song?" Alessandro's mouth opened the shape of words forming silently. I watched his throat work, trying to push sound through silence. "You don't have to say it," I said quickly. "You can just..." "Claire de Lune." The voice was barely audible, rusty, broken, but real. Dante made a sound like he'd been shot. Alessandro's eyes went wide, his hand flying to his throat in shock, like he hadn't known his voice was still there, like he'd thought he'd lost it forever along with everything else. "Alessandro," Dante breathed, crossing to the bed. "You spoke. You..." But Alessandro wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at me, tears still streaming, and in his eyes I saw the question, "Is this okay? Am I allowed?" "It's okay," I whispered. "Your voice is yours. You can use it or not use it, but it's still there. It never left." Alessandro turned to Dante, opened his mouth, but this time, nothing came. The door had closed again. The panic on his face was immediate. "Hey," Dante said quickly, kneeling. "It's okay. I heard you. And I'll hear you again when you're ready. No rush, no pressure." He pulled Alessandro into his arms carefully, like holding something precious and breakable. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know, that I didn't see what you were carrying." Alessandro clung to his father, and they stayed like that, wrapped in each other, in grief and hope and the slow, painful work of healing. I stood to leave, but Dante's hand shot out, catching my wrist. "Stay," he said. Not a command, a request. "Please." So I stayed. sat in the chair by Alessandro's bed, while Dante held his son and the night stretched long and quiet around us. Alessandro fell asleep eventually, exhausted from tears and breakthrough and 2 years of silence finally cracking. But Dante didn't let go, and neither did I. I woke to sunlight and the smell of espresso. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. Then memory flooded back. Alessandro's room, the night, the breakthrough. I'd fallen asleep in the chair, and someone had draped a blanket over me, soft cashmere against my skin. Alessandro's bed was empty. I stood, joints protesting, and followed voices downstairs. The kitchen was huge, all marble and stainless steel, and windows overlooking winter gardens. Alessandro sat at the island, eating pancakes, his legs swinging beneath the stool. Dante stood at the stove, cooking, of all things. He'd changed from last night's clothes into jeans and a white t-shirt. Casual, almost normal. Except nothing about Dante Salvatore was normal, and the shoulder holster visible beneath his arm was a stark reminder that this wasn't a domestic scene from a magazine. "Good morning," I said quietly. Dante turned, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Gratitude. Real, unguarded gratitude. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." Alessandro waved at me, then held up his sketchbook. A new drawing. 3 people at a table, eating, smiling. It took me a moment to recognize that he'd drawn me between him and his father. "You're very good at that," I said, sitting beside him. He beamed an expression so bright it was almost painful, like the sun coming out after years of clouds. Dante set a cup in front of me. Our fingers brushed, and I felt the calluses on his hands. Not soft hands. Hands that had done things I probably didn't want to know about. "Thank you," he said. "For last night." For he stopped, jaw working. "For seeing what I couldn't. He's your son. You would have found the way eventually. Maybe." Dante's gray eyes held mine. Or maybe I would have lost him entirely. Gone so deep into my own guilt that I couldn't see his. "You were both drowning. Sometimes you need someone from the shore." "And you're from the shore?" I smiled slightly. "I'm the waitress from Brooklyn, who doesn't know when to mind her own business." Something almost like humor flickered across his face. Then Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression tense. "Mr. Salvatore, Marco needs to speak with you, urgently." The softness vanished from Dante's face like it had never existed. "I'll be right there." He looked at me. "Stay with Alessandro. Don't leave this room." The command in his voice raised my hackles. "Excuse me?" "Please," he amended, but the steel remained. "Just stay here." He left before I could argue. Alessandro watched him go, then looked at me with concern. I forced a smile. "Your dad has important work, huh?" Alessandro nodded. Then he drew quickly. Men in suits, their faces angry, guns in their hands. My pulse quickened. "That's what he does? That kind of work?" Another nod. More drawing. The same men, but now standing over someone lying on the ground. Red marks spreading across the page. "Alessandro." He grabbed my hand, squeezed hard. A warning, a plea. "You're worried something will happen to him," I said softly. He pointed at me, then at the drawing of the men with guns. Then he crossed his arms over his chest in an X. "Don't let them hurt you. I'm not in danger. I'm just..." Shouting erupted from somewhere in the house. Dante's voice, sharp with fury. And another man responding in rapid Italian. The sound of something breaking. More shouting. Alessandro flinched, shrinking into himself. The brightness from moments ago extinguished like a candle in wind. I pulled him close. "It's okay. Grown-ups argue sometimes. It doesn't mean..." The kitchen door slammed open. A man I didn't recognize, stormed in mid-40s, barrel-chested, with a scar running through his lip. He stopped when he saw me, his expression twisting into something ugly. "This is her?" he demanded in accented English. "The putana interfering with family business?" I stood, putting myself between him and Alessandro. "Get out," he laughed a harsh, bitter sound. "I don't take orders from whores. Where's Dante? He needs to hear what's happening because of his new pet, Marco." Dante appeared in the doorway, his voice deadly quiet. "Walk away, now." "She's a liability," Marco spat. Already people are asking questions. Why does Dante Salvatore let a nobody into his home? Into his son's life? What does she know? What can she tell the federales when they come asking? She knows nothing. Then why is she here? "Because I invited her," Dante moved between Marco and me, a wall of controlled violence. And what happens in my home is not your business. Everything you do is family business. You don't get to forget that because some girl looks at you with soft eyes. My cheeks burned. I'm standing right here, Miss Brennan, Dante said, still not looking at me. Take Alessandro upstairs. Now. I'm not. Now. The word cracked like a whip. Alessandro grabbed my hand, pulling, his face pale with fear. I let him lead me out, but not before I heard Marco's parting shot. She's going to get him killed. You know it. I know it. End this before it costs us everything. Alessandro brought me to a library on the 3rd floor. Windows overlooked the gardens, and walls of books climbed to the ceiling. Safe. Quiet. But my hands shook as I sat on the leather sofa. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to cause problems. Alessandro shook his head violently. He drew quickly. Me. Then a series of angry men, then a large X through the men. You're saying it's not about me specifically? They'd be angry at anyone your dad let close? A nod. Because in your dad's world, letting people in is dangerous. Another nod. Then he drew Dante standing alone, surrounded by walls. Protection and prison all at once. He thinks keeping everyone at distance keeps them safe, I said, understanding. But that's just another kind of drowning, isn't it? Alessandro climbed onto the sofa beside me, leaning his small body against mine. Trust I hadn't earned but was being given anyway. The library door opened an hour later. Dante stood in the doorway, his knuckles scraped and bleeding. He looked at Alessandro, then at me, and I saw the war in his eyes. Wanting to apologize, wanting to explain, wanting to order me out of his life for my own good. Marco's gone, he said finally. He won't bother you again. Did you hurt him? I made my position clear. Which means the rules are simple in my world, Miss Brennan. Protect what's yours. Destroy what threatens it. Don't show weakness. He moved into the room, and I saw exhaustion in every line of his body. And don't let outsiders in. Ever. It only ends in blood. Is that what I am? An outsider? Dante's eyes met mine. I don't know what you are, but Marco was right about one thing. People are watching. People who would use you to get to me. To get to Alessandro. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't lose anyone else. Alessandro stood, crossing to his father. He took Dante's bleeding hand gently, examining the damage. Then he looked up at his father's face, and did something that made my throat tighten. He kissed the scraped knuckles. Forgiveness without words. Dante's composure finally broke. He sank to his knees, pulling Alessandro into his arms, and I saw the truth of it. This man would burn the world to keep his son safe, would do things I couldn't imagine, would sacrifice anything, including, maybe, whatever was growing between us. I stood to leave. Don't, Dante said, his voice rough. Don't go yet, please. So I stayed, again, and wondered how many times I'd have to stay before leaving became impossible, before the danger stopped mattering more than the drowning men I couldn't walk away from. The photograph arrived 3 days later. Rosa handed it to me at the start of my shift, her face grave. This was taped to the door this morning, before we opened. It was grainy, taken from a distance with a long lens. Me and Alessandro in the conservatory, sitting on the floor, his sketchbook between us. But someone had drawn a red X through my face and written in block letters, "Liabilities get eliminated." My hands went numb. Did you call the police? And tell them what? That the Salvatore family is threatening one of my waitresses? Rosa shook her head. Ivy, you need to stop. Whatever you think you're doing helping that boy, fixing that man, it's going to get you killed. I can't just abandon Alessandro. Yes, Rosa said firmly. You can. He has a father, a family, an entire organization to protect him. You have me and this cafe and a studio apartment in Park Slope. Walk away before you can't. She meant well. I knew that. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Alessandro's face when he spoke his mother's name, saw Dante's scarred knuckles, and the war in his eyes between wanting me close and pushing me away for my own good. I couldn't walk away. I called the number on the business card Elena had given me. She answered on the first ring. Miss Brennan, is everything all right? I need to speak to Dante. Now. 20 minutes later, the black SUV pulled up outside Giovanna's. But instead of Elena, Dante himself stepped out. He moved through the cafe like a storm cloud, customers instinctively shrinking back. Rosa crossed herself and disappeared into the kitchen. Dante stopped in front of me, his gray eyes scanning my face. What happened? I handed him the photograph. His expression didn't change, but something violent moved behind his eyes. He studied the image for a long moment, then carefully folded it and slid it into his jacket. "Marco," he said quietly, "I thought you made your position clear." I did. Apparently not clear enough. He looked at me, and I saw the calculation happening. How to protect me, how to remove me from the equation, how to solve this problem that was becoming more complicated than either of us had anticipated. "You need to stop coming to my home." The words hit like a slap. "Excuse me? Alessandro is improving. You've done what you came to do. But Marco was right, your presence makes you a target. And I can't protect you if you keep putting yourself in my world. So, this is it? You're just dismissing me? I'm keeping you alive. By cutting me off from Alessandro? Do you have any idea what that will do to him? He's finally starting to trust, to speak. He spoke once. One word. That doesn't erase 2 years of silence or suddenly make him whole." Dante's voice was hard, controlled. The same voice he probably used when ordering someone's death. "You were a catalyst. But catalysts aren't meant to stay. They start the reaction and get out." Anger flared hot in my chest. "Is that what I am to you? A chemical reaction? You're a waitress from Brooklyn who should have stayed in her lane." The cruelty was deliberate. I could see it in his eyes, the way he was building walls, making himself cold, ensuring I'd hate him enough to walk away safely. But knowing the tactic didn't make it hurt less. "You're a coward," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "Excuse me? You heard me. You're so terrified of losing someone else that you push everyone away first. You'd rather Alessandro stay half-broken and silent than risk letting someone help, because help means vulnerability. And vulnerability means you might feel something, and feeling something means you might fail again. You don't know anything about what I've lost. I know you're doing to Alessandro exactly what you're doing to me, making decisions for us because you think you know best. Because God forbid Dante Salvatore admit he can't control everything." The cafe went utterly silent. Somewhere in the kitchen, Rosa was probably praying for my soul. Dante took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw real anger break through his control. "You want to know what control looks like in my world, Miss Brennan? It's not about power. It's about keeping the people you love alive. It's about making impossible choices and living with the consequences. It's about" he stopped, breathing hard. "It's about knowing that everyone I get close to becomes a weapon someone can use against me. And I won't let that happen to you. That's not your choice to make." "Yes," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "It is. Because Marco's photo was a warning. Next time it'll be a bullet, and I've already buried one person. He cut himself off, jaw clenched. "I'm not burying another." The confession hung between us, raw and aching. "You care about me," I said softly. "I barely know you. You care about me. That's why this is hard." Dante turned away, one hand raking through his hair. For a moment, he looked lost, this powerful man who controlled an empire and couldn't control his own heart. "It doesn't matter what I feel," he said finally. "The answer is the same. Stay away from me. Stay away from Alessandro. Stay alive. And if I don't," he turned back, and the look in his eyes was pure devastation, "then I'll make sure you can't come near us. Restraining order, legal threats, whatever it takes. I'll become the monster you need me to be to keep you safe. You're not a monster. You don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of. The blood on my hands." He stopped, closing his eyes. "Go home, Ivy. Forget you ever met us. Live your quiet life. Be safe." He walked out before I could respond, leaving me standing in the middle of Giovanna's with Rosa's prayers echoing from the kitchen and my heart cracking in my chest. I didn't cry, couldn't cry. Just felt the absence where something fragile and hopeful had started to grow. I made it 4 hours before I broke. Not because of Dante and his walls and his misguided attempts at protection. Because of the package that arrived at my apartment, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, Alessandro's sketchbook. I flipped through pages of drawings, his mother, his father, me, but the last page made my hands shake. Alessandro, standing in the conservatory, surrounded by darkness, reaching toward a door that was closing, and written in his careful child's handwriting, "Please don't leave me too." I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and called Elena's number. She answered immediately. "I need to see Alessandro," I said. "Now." "Miss Brennan?" Mr. Salvatore was very clear. I don't care what he was clear about. Alessandro sent me his sketchbook. He's asking me not to abandon him. So you have two choices. You send a car, or I show up at the estate myself. Either way, I'm coming. Silence. Then, I'll send the car. But this is a very bad idea. Everything about this has been a bad idea, I said. Might as well commit. The SUV arrived 20 minutes later. This time, I didn't wait for permission or escorts. I walked through the front door of the Salvatore estate like I belonged there, past guards who looked confused but didn't stop me, following the path I'd memorized to the conservatory. Alessandro sat in his usual spot on the floor, drawing. He looked up when I entered, and his face transformed relief, joy, hope, all crashing together. He ran to me, and I caught him, holding him tight. I'm not leaving you, I whispered into his hair. Your dad can threaten and posture and try to protect me from a distance, but I'm not leaving you, understand? He nodded against my shoulder, small body shaking. The door slammed open. Dante stood in the doorway, and the fury on his face could have melted steel. Get out, he growled. Now. No, I said calmly, still holding Alessandro. I gave you a direct order. You're not my boss, you're not my keeper, and you sure as hell don't get to decide what's best for me or your son. We stared at each other across the conservatory, and I saw the moment his control finally, completely shattered. You have no idea what you've just done, he said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. No idea what you've just started. Then tell me, I challenged. Tell me what's so dangerous that you'd hurt your own son to keep me safe. Tell me the truth, Dante. For once, just tell me the damn truth. And in his eyes, I saw it. The moment he decided to stop protecting me from the reality of his world. The moment everything changed. 3 months ago, Dante said, his voice cold and controlled. Someone tried to kill Alessandro. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alessandro's small body tensed against mine, his fingers clutching my sweater. What? I breathed. Poison. In his food. We caught it in time, barely. He was sick for days. Dante's hands curled into fists at his sides. We never found who ordered it. But the message was clear. My son is not safe. Will never be safe as long as I'm in this life. As long as people see him as leverage. That's why he comes to Giovanna's, I said, understanding blooming. It's the only place you don't control. The only place he gets to just be a kid. Dante corrected bitterly. Until you made yourself visible. Until you became something he cares about. Now you're leverage too. He moved into the conservatory like a caged predator, all coiled violence and exhaustion. For the first time, I noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. After Sophia died, I promised myself I'd never let anyone close again, never give my enemies another target. I'd be the perfect Salvatore feared, untouchable, alone. He laughed, a harsh sound. And then you walked into that cafe and saw what everyone else ignored. Saw my son when I'd convinced myself he was better off silent. Better off not drawing attention. He was dying inside that silence. I know that now. Dante's gray eyes met mine, and I saw the guilt carving trenches in his soul. But knowing it and fixing it are different things. I don't know how to keep him safe and let him live. I don't know how to protect everyone without pushing them away. His voice cracked. I don't know how to do this. Alessandro pulled away from me. He walked to his father slowly, then pressed his small hand against Dante's chest right over his heart. Papa, he whispered, the second word he'd spoken, and it broke something in both of us. Dante dropped to his knees, pulling Alessandro into his arms. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and I watched this dangerous man, this killer, this crime lord, completely fall apart while holding his son. I'm sorry, Dante choked out. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing. For not protecting you the way you needed. For letting fear make me cruel. Alessandro hugged his father tight, and in that moment, they looked less like a mafia boss and his heir, and more like two people drowning together, finally learning to reach for each other instead of sinking alone. I moved toward the door, giving them privacy. Don't. Dante's voice stopped me. Please. I need. He looked up, and his face was raw, stripped of every defense. I need to tell you the rest. I sat on the floor across from them, waiting. Marco didn't act alone with that photo, Dante said. He's been talking to the Castellano family. They want me gone, want to absorb the Salvatore operations, and eliminate anyone loyal to me. He looked at Alessandro. including my son. My blood went cold. Why? Because I've been trying to change things. Move us away from drugs, from violence, from the worst parts of this life. I want Alessandro to have a choice I never had, to inherit something other than blood and betrayal. Dante's hand tightened on his son's shoulder. But change threatens people, makes them nervous, so they're pushing back, hard. The poison, I said. That was them? We couldn't prove it. But yes, I'm certain. And now they're threatening me to get to you. They're threatening you because you matter, to Alessandro. He stopped, jaw clenched. To both of us. The confession hung heavy in the conservatory's green light. I can protect myself, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. No, Dante said flatly. You can't. Not from them. Not from what's coming. Then teach me. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Excuse me? You said I'm a target now. That I matter enough to be leverage. So teach me how to survive in your world. Don't push me away. Bring me in. Make me part of whatever you're planning. Because I'm not walking away from Alessandro. Which means I'm not walking away from you. Which means we need a different solution than just this. I gestured between us. Whatever this is impossible, Dante said roughly. This is a waitress from Brooklyn getting involved with a man who has blood on his hands, who has enemies that would tear her apart just to hurt him. This is real, I interrupted. It's real, and it's terrifying, and it's probably going to end badly. But it's also the only thing that feels true in a long time, so stop trying to save me from it and let me choose. Alessandro looked between us, his expression somewhere between hope and fear. Dante stood slowly, running a hand through his hair. He looked like a man at war with himself. Everything he'd built, fighting against everything he wanted. If you stay, he said carefully, it means protection. 24-hour security. Living arrangements that I control. No more solo shifts at the cafe. No more quiet life. Okay. It means learning the rules, learning who to trust and who to fear, learning how to read a room for threats, how to move through my world without becoming a target. Okay. It means, he stepped closer, and I saw the danger and the desire warring in his eyes. It means accepting that I'm not a good man, that I've done things that would make you hate me, that I will continue to do things to protect what's mine, that you won't understand or agree with. I stood, meeting his eyes. I know who you are, Dante. I've seen the violence underneath. I've seen what you're capable of. And I'm still here. You don't know everything. Then tell me. All of it. No more walls. No more protection through distance. If I'm in, I'm all in. But that means truth. Complete truth. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things unsaid. Then Dante reached out, his scarred knuckles brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. I killed Sophia's murderer. I went still. What? Not her death, that was the aneurysm, but the man who came to our home 3 days after her funeral, who tried to take Alessandro because he thought a grieving widower would be weak, would be an easy target. Dante's voice was flat, emotionless. I killed him with my bare hands. Made sure it took a long time. Made sure he understood exactly what happens when you threaten my son. Good, I said. He blinked, clearly expecting horror or disgust. Good? You protected Alessandro. That's what fathers do. I'm a murderer, Ivy. You're a man who keeps his family safe, in a world that doesn't play by normal rules. That's not the same thing. Something in Dante's expression shifted the last wall, finally crumbling. He cupped my face with both hands, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he murmured, or the most foolish. Probably both. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time since I'd met him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened, almost happy. Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. It was desperation and relief, and 2 years of grief, finally finding something other than pain. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I kissed him back with everything I had, all the fear and fury and strange, impossible hope that had been building since the moment I met his son. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro was watching us with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. Okay? Dante asked him roughly. Alessandro nodded. Then he moved between us, taking both our hands, holding us together. And in that moment, standing in the conservatory with winter light streaming through glass walls, and the three of us connected like we'd been designed to fit this way, I understood what I'd been fighting for. Not safety, not peace, family. Messy and dangerous and real. Worth fighting for. Worth risking everything for. The attack came during dinner. I'd been living in the Salvatore estate for 3 days. 3 days of armed guards, security briefings, learning to check cars for bombs and rooms for bugs. 3 days of Alessandro's smiles getting bigger, his words coming more frequently, still halting, still difficult, but present. 3 days of stolen moments with Dante, his hand brushing mine in hallways, his eyes finding me across rooms. The unspoken promise of something building between us. We were eating pasta that Dante had cooked himself. If I'm going to be domesticated, I might as well do it properly, when the power cut out. Complete darkness. Then, a second later, emergency lights kicked on red and eerie. Alessandro, under the table. Now. Dante's voice was pure command. He already had a gun in his hand. Where had that come from? Alessandro scrambled beneath the massive dining table, and I moved to follow. Ivy, with him. Keep him quiet. Don't come out until I say. Footsteps thundered through the house, shouting in Italian, the sound of breaking glass. Dante moved toward the door with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this before. But before he reached it, Elena burst in, blood streaming from her temple. Sir, we have a breach. Multiple points. There, gunfire. Close. Too close. Dante grabbed Elena, shoved her toward the table. Protect them. With your life. Then he was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Under the table, Alessandro pressed against me, trembling. I wrapped my arms around him, trying to be the calm he needed while my own heart hammered against my ribs. It's okay, I whispered. Your dad's going to handle this. He's going to... More gunfire, screaming, the wet sound of impact. Elena crouched at the table's edge, her gun drawn, blood dripping down her face. How many? I asked. At least 6 made it through the perimeter, maybe more outside. She glanced at me. You know how to use one of these? She was holding out a second gun. No, I admitted. Point and squeeze. Safety's off. Aim for center mass. If anyone comes through that door who isn't Mr. Salvatore or our people, you shoot. Understand? I took the gun with shaking hands. It was heavier than I expected. Colder. I understand. Time became strange. Seconds stretched like taffy. Every sound amplified my breathing, Alessandro's quiet whimpering, the distant chaos of the assault. I thought about Giovanna's, about Rosa's warnings, about the safe, quiet life I'd had just weeks ago, how simple it had been, how boring, how desperately I wanted it back. No, that was a lie. I wanted this terrifying, impossible thing I'd chosen. This family. The dining room door exploded inward. 2 men entered, dressed in black, faces covered. They swept the room with tactical precision, and when they saw the table, they smiled. Under there, one said in accented English. The boy and the girl. Elena fired first. 3 quick shots that dropped the first man. But the second was faster. His return fire caught her in the chest. She went down hard, gasping. No! I screamed. Alessandro buried his face against me, sobbing. The second man approached the table slowly, his gun leveled. Come out. Now, or I shoot through the table. I raised the gun Elena had given me. My hands shook so badly I could barely aim. I will shoot you, I said, voice quavering. He laughed. You've never fired a gun in your life. I can see it in your eyes. He was right. But I squeezed the trigger anyway. The recoil nearly broke my wrist. The bullet went wide, embedding in the wall behind him. But it bought me 2 seconds, long enough for Dante to appear in the doorway. He shot the man 3 times, chest, head, with the cold efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times to count. The body dropped, and Dante was across the room in seconds, kicking the gun away, checking for threats. Then he was on his knees beside the table, pulling us out. Are you hurt? His hands moved over me, checking for wounds. Ivy, answer me. Are you hurt? I'm fine. But Elena, she's alive. Vest took most of it. Dante's eyes moved to Alessandro. You okay, Filio? Alessandro nodded, still crying, and threw himself into his father's arms. Dante held him with one hand, kept his gun ready with the other. We need to move. The house isn't secure. How many? I asked. We got most of them, but there could be more coming. Backup tunnel we go now. He pulled us through the house, moving fast, gun leading. Bodies littered hallways, some theirs, some ours. I tried not to look, failed. The carnage was worse than I'd imagined. This was what Dante's world really looked like when you stripped away the nice suits and the mansion and the pretense of civilization. This was blood and death and survival. We reached a wine cellar. Dante moved behind a rack, pressed something, and the wall slid open, revealing a tunnel lit by sparse emergency lights. "Go," he ordered. "Follow the lights. There's a car waiting at the end. Keys in the ignition. Drive north. Don't stop until you reach." "What do you mean you?" I demanded. "You're coming with us. I have to make sure they're all dead." That no one followed. "Absolutely not. We leave together or we don't leave." "Ivy, I'm not arguing about this, Dante. We're a family now, remember? That means we don't split up during the horror movie. Despite everything, the bodies, the blood, the danger," he almost smiled. "You're insane. You knew that when you kissed me." Alessandro tugged on his father's sleeve. "Papa, per favore." Together, the pleas spoken out loud made Dante's resistance crumble. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Together. But you do exactly what I say. No arguments. Deal." We entered the tunnel. The walls were stone, dripping with moisture, narrow enough that Dante had to hunch his shoulders. Alessandro walked between us, holding both our hands. Behind us, the mansion's distant sounds of violence slowly faded. "Who was it?" I asked quietly. "Marco. Castellano family." Marco was just the inside man. Dante's voice was rough, but not anymore. "You killed him? Earlier today, when I realized what he'd done." He glanced back at me. "I'm sorry you had to see this. All of it." "I'm not. You should be." "Dante, I shot at someone tonight. Missed completely, but I tried. That's who I am now. Someone who protects what she loves." The word hung between us. Love. "Ivy." A sound behind us. Footsteps. Running. Dante spun, pushing us behind him. "Run. Now." "But." "Go." I grabbed Alessandro and ran. The tunnel seemed endless, our footsteps echoing, my lungs burning. Behind us, gunfire, shouting, the sound of bodies hitting stone, then silence. "Papa!" Alessandro screamed, trying to turn back. I held him tight, kept running, even as my heart shattered. We reached the end of the tunnel, a garage, car waiting exactly as promised. I shoved Alessandro into the back seat, hands shaking so badly I could barely close the door. Then Dante emerged from the tunnel. Blood streaked his face. His shirt was torn. But he was alive, walking, whole. I ran to him, and he caught me, held me so tight I couldn't breathe. I thought I couldn't finish. "I'm here. I'm here." He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my mouth. "Let's go." Before more come, we drove into the night, leaving the mansion and its bodies and its blood behind. Alessandro fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from terror. Dante drove with one hand, the other holding mine. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe, somewhere they'll never think to look. And then we end this. Permanently." His grip tightened. "I'm done being reactive. Done letting them threaten what's mine. The Castellanos want war. They'll get it, but this time, I'm going to make sure they can never touch my family again." His family. Not just Alessandro. Us. I leaned my head against his shoulder and watched Brooklyn disappear in the rearview mirror, replaced by highway lights and the promise of something new, something dangerous, something ours. The safe house was in the Adirondacks, 3 hours north of New York, deep enough in the mountains that cell service was spotty and neighbors were miles away. A cabin that looked rustic from the outside, but was equipped with enough technology and weapons to fight off a small army. We arrived at dawn, exhausted and blood-stained and alive. Alessandro fell asleep immediately in a bedroom with blackout curtains and locks on both sides of the door. I stood in the doorway, watching his small chest rise and fall, and felt the adrenaline finally crash. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dante found me there, leaning against the doorframe, tears streaming silently down my face. "Come here," he said softly. He led me to the bathroom, started the shower, helped me undress with gentle, careful hands. When he saw the bruises already forming on my ribs from when I'd thrown myself over Alessandro under the table, his jaw clenched. "I'm okay," I whispered. "You could have died, but I didn't." He joined me under the water, and we stood there together while steam filled the room, and the heat slowly loosened the knots in my shoulders. His hands washed the blood from my hair, the gunpowder residue from my hands, gentle, reverent. I love you, he said quietly. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. But I need you to know that, in case. I kissed him to stop the words. Kissed him with everything I had, all the fear and relief and desperate, aching love that had been growing since the moment he'd knelt beside his son and admitted he didn't know how to do this alone. I love you too, I said against his mouth. Even though you're dangerous and complicated, and probably going to get me killed, I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. We made love in the shower, under the steam and the water and the weight of what we'd survived. It wasn't gentle, too much fear still racing through our veins for gentleness. It was claiming and desperate and real. His hands on my body like I was something precious he might lose. My nails digging into his shoulders like I could hold us in this moment forever. Afterward, we dried off and fell into bed. I expected nightmares, but instead I slept dreamlessly, wrapped in Dante's arms, his heartbeat steady beneath my cheek. I woke to voices. Dante and Alessandro were in the kitchen, cooking. I could smell bacon and coffee and something sweet pancakes, maybe. I pulled on one of Dante's shirts and patted out to find them working side by side, Alessandro carefully flipping pancakes while Dante supervised. Good morning, I said. Alessandro beamed at me. Buongiorno. Ivy. The greeting spoken out loud, clear and confident, made my eyes sting. His voice is getting stronger, Dante said, noticing my reaction. The doctor said it would. Now that he's not fighting to stay silent, the words are coming easier. Doctor. When? Last night. While you were sleeping. I had someone come up. Check both of you. His eyes held mine. You have a fractured rib, by the way. From shielding Alessandro. You need to rest. I'm fine. You're injured. There's a difference. Alessandro plated pancakes and brought them to the table with such careful pride that I couldn't argue. We ate together. This strange little family forged in blood and survival. And for a few minutes everything felt almost normal. Then Dante's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went cold. I need to make some calls. Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone. What's happening? The Castellanos are regrouping, but so am I. He kissed my forehead, then Alessandro's. I'll be in the office. Lock the door behind me. He disappeared into a room at the back of the cabin, and I heard the muted sound of his voice, sharp, commanding, dangerous, making whatever moves he needed to end this. Alessandro took my hand. He'll fix it, he said quietly. He always does. You're not scared? I was, before you came. His dark eyes met mine. But now we have you. That makes us stronger. The simple faith in his words broke something in me. I pulled him into a hug, and he hugged back fiercely. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. Ever. Good. Because Papa needs you. He pretends he doesn't, but he does. I laughed through tears. When did you get so wise? Mama used to say I was an old soul. Alessandro pulled back, his expression thoughtful. She'd like you. You make Papa remember how to smile. I think your dad makes himself remember. I just give him a reason. Same thing. The war lasted 3 weeks. Dante coordinated from the safe house, moving pieces on a chessboard I couldn't fully see. Men came and went, his soldiers, his strategists, his enforcers. They treated me with wary respect, and Alessandro with fierce protectiveness. I learned the rhythms of this life, the constant vigilance, the way deals were made and blood was spilled, the cost of power. But I also learned the other side. How Dante read to Alessandro every night in Italian and English both. How he cooked elaborate dinners on Sundays because Sofia had done the same. How he held me after nightmares and whispered promises in the dark about futures we might build. The Castellano family fell piece by piece. Assets frozen, allies turned, key members arrested or eliminated. Dante was surgical, ruthless, and absolutely unforgiving. When it was over, when the last Castellano stronghold had been absorbed and the last threat neutralized, Dante came to bed at 3 a.m. and collapsed beside me. It's done, he said hoarsely. All of it? For now. There will always be others, but the immediate threat is gone. We can go home. Home? I bought a place in Westchester, gated community, good schools, far enough from the city to be safe, close enough that I can work. He rolled to face me, his gray eyes exhausted but clear. I want to give Alessandro a childhood. I want to give you a life that isn't just survival. He stopped, jaw working. I want to be more than what I was built to be. You already are. No, but I'm trying. With you, with him. He cupped my face. Marry me. The words hung in the dark room. That's not a question, I pointed out. I'm not good at questions. I'm better at declarations. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Marry me. Build this life with me. Let me spend whatever time I have left trying to deserve you. Yes, I whispered. Yes. He kissed me like I was air and he'd been drowning, and we stayed tangled together until dawn broke through the windows. 6 months later, the house in Westchester had a garden where Alessandro grew vegetables and drew plans for a treehouse. I worked part-time at a local cafe, not because I needed to, but because I wanted that piece of normalcy, that connection to who I'd been. Dante still ran the family business, but differently, legitimizing where he could, walking away from what he couldn't change, grooming successors for the parts of the empire he wanted no part of anymore. We got married in the garden with just Alessandro and a judge, no fanfare, no family politics, just vows and rings, and the three of us promising to choose each other, every day, despite everything. The nightmares came less frequently. Alessandro's voice grew stronger. And slowly, carefully, we built something that looked almost like peace. I still thought about that first day sometimes, the boy in booth 7, the father who'd mocked the idea that anyone could reach his silent son. How easily I could have walked away, but I hadn't. And that choice, that one small choice to see someone who needed to be seen, had led here, to mornings with coffee and laughter, to Alessandro reading aloud from books he loved, to Dante holding me in the dark and whispering about the man he wanted to become. Ivy? Alessandro called from the garden. Can you help with the tomatoes? Coming, I called back. Dante looked up from his laptop, and something soft moved across his face. You're happy, he said. Not a question. An observation. I am. Even though it's messy, even though I'm still, especially because of that. I crossed to him, kissed the top of his head. I didn't fall in love with perfect Dante. I fell in love with real. His hand caught mine, held tight. Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for letting me stay. Outside, Alessandro shouted something about the neighbor's cat getting into his vegetables. Dante groaned, but he was smiling as he stood, following me into the garden to chase away the intruder. And in that moment, sunshine and dirt and laughter and the beautiful, messy chaos of the life we'd chosen, I understood what the Mafia Boss had learned from the shy waitress who saw his son. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone reach you, even when you're drowning, especially then.